a friend, a guest, a former client of Abundant, Ian Koniak, who is an Abundant legend with what he has been up to and the things that he's done, just as a member of our community, and just a great influence on our community and now the world with everything that he's up to. So, Ian, welcome to the show today.
Great to see you, and thanks for having me on.
My pleasure. So we're going to start a little differently today, and I wanted to invite anybody who's watching right now to join Ian and I in a practice to get started. And Ian, I think you've done this before. We're going to do a heart lock. All right. So this is a practice that I learned from the Heart Math Institute. If anybody watching has never heard of the Heart Math Institute, check it out. Their research is amazing. Their training is fantastic. It's all about the different shifts that happen in your physiology, your emotions, your psychology when you're connected to your heart. And they go into some really cool stuff about that. So this is a heart connected practice, which is something that's important as an abundant leader. If you're going to leave the world better than you found it, you got to come from your heart. So just to slow down a bit before we get into our show here today, Ian and everybody else, let's just begin by taking our awareness and our focus and bringing it to our heart as we bring our hands to our heart. So slow down the thinking. Bring your awareness from your mind into your body. And bring your awareness and focus to the area beneath your hands. And now begin to breathe into your heart. In through the nose, out through the mouth. And with each breath, connect a little more deeply to your heart. And now from this place of awareness resting in the heart, activate a genuine sense of appreciation for whatever you're grateful for right now. And then once you've activated that feeling, just radiate it out. Imagine yourself radiating out that feeling from your heart out into the world. And whenever we're ready, we can open our eyes and come on back. All right. Well, Ian, whenever we do a heart lock, I like to have us both share what came up for us. So I'm curious what came up for you.
Yeah, just the first thing was just my son. I literally just came. He just woke up a little while ago, and I came in and say hi to him. He's about 10 weeks old now, my son Luke, and he's giving me the biggest smiles and just really happy to see me and just joy in his eyes. And then I thought about my wife, who also was very happy, and my family, my son Max, who's now 4.5 years old. So that was what came up for me.
Awesome. For me, what came up is being grateful for the journey. Just the journey that we go on as leaders, and how it always gives us what we need, exactly where we're at. And as I'm here with you, Ian, I'm grateful for your journey and being able to be a part of it and seeing it over the last few years. So, it's just like each stage gives us exactly what we need. So thanks for dropping in. And again, a pleasure to have you here today. So Ian, just to talk a little bit about who you are and what you do, why don't you share with our audience who you are, what you do? And there's a couple different aspects to that, but both your Salesforce capacity and what's been coming online over the last few years.
Yeah, I am in my career a strategic account director at Salesforce. So my role is really to make sure that Salesforce is aligned with our largest enterprise accounts, Fortune 500 companies. I am responsible for driving new sales and growing these accounts in the highest capacity possible. So I have a team of about 20 people that support me. Salesforce is a large company, and we have a lot of different sales specialists. We've acquired a lot of companies like MuleSoft and Tableau, and I'm really responsible to make sure we are expanding our footprint within the accounts and selling all the different products we have, and really making sure, more importantly, that we're solving the client's biggest problems so we earn a seat at the big table with senior executives, and we're viewed as a trusted advisor to them rather than as a vendor.
Awesome.
In my personal life, I'm married. I have a wonderful family, and I also run a small coaching business. And I produce a lot of videos to help the sales community truly, take what I've learned over the past 18 years through ups and downs, and hopefully give a lot of value to them so they can learn from my failures as well as my triumphs. And I've been doing that for the past few years, and that's going well as well.
Thanks for sharing. And also, just to let people know, you're not just a strategic account director, you're also really good at what you do. And in 2018, you were the #1 salesperson at Salesforce. Was that right?
Yeah, it was actually, fiscal year 2018. So I had a couple, really, the past 3 years have been fantastic. So I finished #1, then I was followed that by the top 5 in the company, and last year I was overplanned again. So the past really 3 years have been fantastic. And that's when I started to say, you know what, I need to share how I'm selling, what I'm doing with the broader sales community, because I don't want them to make the same mistakes that I made before I joined Abundant, is when all this shift started occurring for me.
That's awesome. And so let's go back, because the last 3 years have been super powerful in your results, but also more your leadership coming online in the way that you're impacting both clients and beyond. And I want to just go back with you to 2016, right? And that's when you and I met. And I've shared this with you before, but I remember where I was at. I was in my parents' backyard. I was standing in the grass, and I was talking to this guy, Ian Koniak, who had a ton of energy and was aware that you were just not putting it all on the table. You were comfortable, you were a good rep, and that's a tough place for a lot of people to be, especially in tech sales. Is if you're a good rep and you're making $250,000 and you can pay for stuff, and there's not necessarily the drive from your circumstances to really be your best self as a leader, and you got to tap into something greater to really get that potential out. And so I want to just go back with you, Ian. If we go back to 2016 and you think about what a world was like in the way that you viewed it, and kind of what was holding you back at that time, let's just start there. Let's start at the beginning of that journey and how you were showing up, how are you thinking about things, how are you operating, that was getting you good enough results, but it wasn't a reflection of your fullest potential. So what was holding you back then?
Yeah, I think, there's a lot to that question, but
Right.
The way I operated before was with the mindset that my self-worth was directly a reflection of my performance at work. And so I was on the sales roller coaster, I like to call it, where if you have a great month, you're feeling great. If you have a bad month, you're feeling bad. And you really are subject to your performance. And I hear this over and over again in sales. It's like, well, I'm only as good as my performance. And I really didn't have a lot of balance in my life. I wasn't doing things that brought fulfillment and joy, certainly wasn't contributing and wasn't growing in the way that I did after joining Abundant. So I was operating from a place of scarcity where I believed that I was only as good as my performance in sales. And as we all know, career and sales performance is just one aspect of performance. And how we perform as husbands and as fathers and as friends and as members of society carries a lot of weight. And I just didn't value any of that stuff. And so I was really operating on this like high stress, I got to sell because I'm only as good as what I sell. And it was exhausting. And it was really, I would say, up and down. Some days were great, some weeks were great, some days were bad, some weeks were bad. And it was definitely a recipe for burnout. And I was not truly happy and fulfilled with my career at that time.
Yeah, I think what you're sharing there is a very common experience, and it can be complicated because we're trained throughout our whole life to be achievers. Really, that's the achiever mindset. Well, if I'm achieving, then I'm good enough, right? If I'm and when I hit this number, when I get to this place, then finally I will feel fulfilled. And on that roller coaster of like, when you're showing up that way, that creates the roller coaster. And what's interesting that really shifts that is when you detach from the results, which is hard to do when your self-worth has been based off that our whole life. And we go back before sales. It's like same thing in sports or in school, right? Or with grades. And so we're really conditioned at an early age to check the next box, climb the next rung on the ladder. And like, that's where you're good enough, right? You got more to say on that?
Yeah, that's what was holding me back. Exactly what you described. This belief that I was only as good as my performance. And because I hadn't performed at the level I knew I was capable, you have to understand, I came from a company where I was promoted 5 times in 5 years. I ran a $60 million business before coming to Salesforce and had 80 employees at Rico. And so my ego was up here and my performance was actually here. So there was this lack of congruence between what I thought I was worth and capable of and what I was actually doing. So I was really dissatisfied with myself. And that was what was holding me back. I was unhappy. I was stressed. And the way I was operating day to day came from that place. And that does impact when you're negative or when you're stressed or anxious. It does impact how you interact with clients. It impacts how you show up on sales calls. It impacts what you believe is possible, which is very much aligned to whatever you believe is what's going to happen. I mean, our thoughts are our reality. And my thoughts were that I'm a 250K kind of guy. I'm running the mill, that I couldn't be number one because I hadn't seen that result yet. And so it required me to completely kind of tear apart everything I knew and come with a beginner's mindset, willing to do anything because I really was upset and frustrated with myself before joining Abundant because I felt that I was unworthy and that I really was not living up to my potential, and I did not know what to do and I didn't know where to turn. So it was frustrating, and that very thing was what was holding me back, that very mindset.
Yeah, and I love that you mentioned the beginner's mindset, and just to unpack that a little bit, because that gets thrown out a lot. But what it really takes is a moment where you commit to being a beginner again. And I can think of several times where that's happened for me. And I've seen it happen with others where like that is the pivotal moment, and not everything changes overnight, but it's like you have to take off your ego and say, you know what? I have done some great things. I've been the man, I've been the top dog, I've been the woman, whatever. But hey, to get where I want to go, to really step into the vision of why I'm really here and what I really know is capable in this life, like I got to be a beginner again. Like I'm not there. I've got a lot of work to do. And I just want to acknowledge in you, it's like, even when you were number one, right? It's like the journey wasn't over. There was more journey. And so you've, continued to grow and say yes each step along the way.
Yeah. You're reminding me of a quote I just read in the LA Times yesterday. It was from Dwight Howard. So Dwight Howard of the Lakers used to be Superman in Orlando Magic. And now he's taking a backseat to Davis and LeBron James. And he's kind of in that support role. And he wrote, like, what's been the key to your success? Because he's made a huge impact on the team. He said, for me, it was just letting go of ego, pride, and just understanding that you can't have that in order to live a really successful life. And I thought that was awesome because he had come thinking about who he was in the past and holding on to these glory days of Superman in Orlando, right? That's what was actually hurting him from, being the best he could be. So
Right.
that reminds me of that quote.
The quote will mean a little bit less when Jimmy Butler takes them down, though. So
last night, man, that was a hell of a performance. It's been fun to watch, but
yeah,
we'll see. He was a one-man show.
I know. We'll see what happens. But being from Chicago, I've always been a Jimmy Butler believer. So.
I'm in LA, so I can't I can't share your enthusiasm, but it was fun to watch, and I'm glad they actually won. So it's more of a series than 3-0.
That's right.
It's not fun for anyone. So
to digress, right? That's a great quote, and it has been interesting to watch Dwight come back around and actually make some meaningful contributions because he's kind of a nobody for a while. And that's a great example. It's a great metaphor for that. And so if we go back to your first immersion, and we were in the factory, right? I believe it's the largest house in San Francisco where we ran your event. And I remember being in the living room with you on that wooden. Do you remember that bench that was carved out of a tree, like that big log?
Yeah.
And there was something that that to me was a pivotal moment, not just because you decided to work with Abundant, but there was something inside of you that came alive and that was reignited in that weekend. And I'm curious if you can just go back to there, what shifted for you?
The big thing that you do really well, and for anyone watching this, Ben is truly gifted at this, and it made a big impact on me, was a visualization of what was possible. Right. I've been operating this very short term now, without really looking too far ahead in my future as to what I really wanted. And you took me through a visualization. This was pre-Braymant days when you were doing the visualization, and you had us imagine a year from now and really hitting whatever our wildest goals were. And I had a number in my head. I believe you said, hey, think of a number, whatever number pops up for you. And that number for me was 4 million. I think the most I had sold up to that point was 1.5 million in a year. And this 4 million number seemed crazy at the time. And then you had us visualize all the people that were waiting for you on the other side, and all the people who were so proud of you. And I pictured, my leadership at Salesforce. I pictured my family. I pictured my my friends, my customers, and I tapped into this feeling of such joy and accomplishment that I had set my mind to a goal and really hit it beyond what was possible. I ended up selling 5.9 million that year. So I far exceeded that number at that time. But what it left me with was I really, in that moment, felt that immense joy of having hit that goal through that visualization exercise. And then when we snapped out of it, and when you said, okay, come back to the room, it was 45 minutes of, a deep visualization. I was like, I want that. I don't care what I have to do to get it. I want to accomplish that. And it's interesting because I have gone through that a few times with the Abundant community of visualization of tapping into a vision of a better future and a brighter future. And the people is what really stood out for me, the people that I was impacting. We did a similar exercise in Colorado after I joined, and I imagined my wife in our home gardening and outside with our family. And I'm not kidding, 4 years later now, we have that dream home. We have the beautiful garden. We have the family that we didn't have at the time. I mean, this is pre-Max. And it was I shouldn't say pre, my first son was a year, but it's pre-Luke, and he was just a baby at the time. But it's almost like the exact home that I visualized. And I can't explain it other than, there's forces in this world, God, in faith, and, the universe, or whatever you believe, that when you will something, when you manifest it and you believe it and you work for it, you got to work for it. Your dreams can and do become reality, but you got to have that faith combined with the work ethic. And what you brought out is the faith in what was possible. And that was what really stuck, is like, I hadn't really thought that far ahead as to what I was capable of and really visualized it. And once I did, I was like, man, like I believed it. I really started believing that I could do these things. And I tell you, you got a real gift in bringing that out of people, because I had never thought, I was, like I said, I was comfortable being that 250K kind of run of the mill guy. So to sell 4 million and have this dream house, for me was just, wishful thinking. But once I felt into it, it became my reality, and I would stop at nothing until I got it.
It's really cool to see those visions come alive for people. Right. And it comes alive in different ways for different people. But, I got to stay in your guest bedroom. Right.
That's right.
I got to stay in the home that
you got to come now, because the sound system we have is 100% courtesy of you. And
boom. I know you sent me that text and I was like,
DJ, we'll have a little party once COVID madness dies down, and you could host it.
We'll pick a post-COVID date.
Yep. That's right.
I'm like holding back from making a comment right now. So I'm gonna keep holding back.
No holding back.
It's just wild, right? All the shit that's happening right now. Such a crazy time. So, but I want to stay focused on your journey, because I think that's more valuable. And what you're describing is so simple, but so powerful and so easy not to do. And what I'm hearing, because it's one thing to have the visualization, it's another to follow the vision, to pursue it. And, I think what happens is that people just get so caught up in their circumstances, right? And we move towards what we think and talk about most. And so if we're just thinking about our number last month, the number we need to hit this month, our circumstances, our challenges that are right in front of us, then we say, well, what's possible from my circumstances? And we think much smaller, and we don't see as much opportunity. And what you're speaking to is like, you know what? Forget all of that stuff. Like, who cares what you did the last 3 years, right? Like, there's a time to learn from that. But if we're choosing where you're going to orient from in your journey, let's start from the question of what's truly possible and what would make you come alive, right? That's where we need to start. And we got to clear the crap out, right? And create an environment where you can really connect to that. And so, that's what you're describing, is you connected to what was possible for you. And then you started to lead from that place and be like, all right, well, it's just a different way of thinking. If that's what's possible, what would that take? Who would I need to be? And that who would I need to be is another powerful piece that you did step into, right? And I want to talk a little bit about that, because I think it's so powerful for people watching, because you became the version of yourself that was going to connect with really powerful executives. And I'd love if you could tell us a little bit about that version of yourself. What did you learn about that identity and what it takes?
Yeah, I think it's been a learning process, man. It's been a journey, but I think the foundation of it is I'm equal to everybody. Yeah. We're all equal, right? I was putting executives on a pedestal. I was putting CEOs and CFOs and CIOs on a pedestal. I was intimidated to call them because I thought of myself as a lowly sales rep versus really a trusted advisor for their business. And for those of you who follow Salesforce, we've grown tremendously. And we have some of, I think it's 97% of the Fortune 500 are using Salesforce in some capacity. And I didn't think of myself as this executive from, one of the top companies that could truly impact a business and drive change at the organizational level. I thought I'm trying to sell them products and services, and I'm trying to hit my quota, versus shifting outward to really take the time to understand what it was that these companies that I managed, what they were trying to do, what their challenges were, what their struggles were. And once I got out of my own head and started really just being a vessel for really helping and serving them and their needs, the results actually followed. And so before, I was really playing the short game, right? I was trying to get the quick sale. I was trying to use tactics to close business. And what I shifted is I moved to the long game. There was a real estate company that I was servicing, and they had an ambitious goal of really providing Salesforce for all of their, their 50,000 agents. And rather than just giving them a quote or a proposal or understanding what they needed, myself and a few people on my team, we traveled around the country meeting with real estate agents, understanding what their challenges were, understanding what their pain points were, understanding what it was, so that when we proposed something, we really could give them a solution that would impact their business and their lives, versus just taking what the company was telling us they needed and going with it. So I think spending more time up front, really understanding your clients and trying to connect with them at a higher level than just selling them, was a major shift that I made. And the second shift was, not being afraid to go out and contact the executives of these companies, right? I've been, and what I teach in a lot of my videos is executive conversations, how to meet with COOs and CEOs and really make an impact when you're speaking with them. And I hadn't been doing that until I really started to view myself as an equal, when I knew that our business could transform their business and solve some of these challenges. And when I started to believe that, that's when I showed up and was confident in placing these calls, because I knew that I'd be doing a disservice if I wasn't selling at the top level. If I was talking to a manager who only cares about their one department and their one goal, I really wasn't going to have the impact that Salesforce could have in the entire organization. And so I think that mental shift of like, hey, we all put our pants on the same way. We're all equal. We're all human here. No one's better than each other. I think that's something that I had to make. And that's something a lot of sales reps have to make, because they simply don't reach out. It's not, they never take a swing at the top.
Yeah.
And I was the same way. I wasn't swinging at the top. I was swinging where I was comfortable, which was at that director, maybe VP level. I wasn't contacting CEOs. So with the real estate company, I went right to the COO, and we had meetings with the CEO, the CFO, and I've kind of been doing that ever since. And it's been a real game changer for me in shortening the sales cycle and really building connections. Because once you have a C-suite person endorsing your work, then everyone listens. Whereas if you're trying to go from the bottom up, it's a different story. So that's kind of the way I shifted how I showed up in that year and the following years. And it's been a huge game changer for me.
Absolutely. And what I love that you're speaking to is the inner game of that, right? Because in sales, the strategy and tactics absolutely matter, right? Like you got to know how to communicate powerfully. But at some point that becomes a limiting factor if you're just doing the strategy or the tactic and you're not really embodying the psychology and the energy that matches it, right? And like that's what I see all the time is with the top performers, the people who are really, blowing away their competition. Not that it's about competing, it's because of who they are, not what they're doing. That's and right. When you have that belief of like, you talk about the belief of really seeing, like really believing, not just saying it, not just being told it, but really believing, like feeling that belief inside of how Salesforce could transform their company, right? Like that's the key. Because when you don't feel that or believe that, you're like, well, do they need this? Or you're in fear, and that gets picked up on, that gets felt. And like, that's not very trustable.
Yeah. And it's like what you guys also brought out is really knowing your greatness, I guess, like who you are at your core, what makes you great, what makes you unique. And again, if that's an external factor versus internal, it's going to be dependent on, outside circumstances. But when you know at your core that you're a great leader, that you can make an impact, that you can change lives, that you're a good person, that you're honest, that you're inspiring, whatever your values are, when you know that at your core, that's how you show up. And I just hadn't even taken the time to really think about who I was. I was so like just a product of my environment, my circumstances. And that's really helped me with coaching and with speaking. I've been doing, I spoke at your conference for a whole day. For me to be able to give a whole day of sales training for Abundant, right? I probably wouldn't have done that in 2016 because I'm like, well, I'm not worthy. I haven't hit the goal. But okay, once you make $1 million and you back it up, okay, now I'm worth it. Well, it shouldn't be that way, right? You should know that you're worth it ahead of time so that you can make the $1 million. And that's the big shift, is like people are waiting for some type of performance before they can feel happy or joy and to feel worthy. And it's just bullshit. And it really is part of my language, because we're all worthy. We all have gifts, we all have strengths, and we got to start living to them. And, fortunately for me, I had that external validation, and now I'm like, okay, I can do this. And I feel very confident coaching and, giving talks to companies. And the more I do that, the more confident I become. So it's like, if I was waiting to feel like my accomplishments were making me worthy of doing that, I never would have stepped into producing videos or coaching or doing any of this stuff. Cause, would have been waiting for, whatever, arbitrary definition that I gave myself. And that's not the way life works. You've got to start believing in yourself and have that confidence regardless. Sometimes executives and people, I don't have tons of examples, but there's so many, I think, who's the guy from KFC, Colonel Sanders, right? He had so many businesses. He didn't really blow up until he was 70, but he always had that faith. There's so many entrepreneurs and executives that just keep trying, and they believe in themselves, regardless of failures, regardless of how many setbacks they have. You have to keep that belief that you're worthy. And I think it's really hard in today's world, where we're only told we're as good as our income, or, we're as good as our bank account. And it's something that, I think Abundant does an amazing job of helping bring out the best qualities in people, regardless of how they perform. Because if I thought in that time of 2017 that I was only good as my performance, I would have thought I was terrible, because I missed my quota for several years in a row prior to joining. And that's what caused me to join. But but I maintained that belief that I was capable of more. You brought that out of me, and then I finished number one. So it's amazing, the power of, like, confidence and belief and vision, and keeping true to yourself, regardless of what might be going around you, or what challenges you might be facing.
And that's more important now than ever. Like, look at how crazy the world is. That's why I wanted to stay with the conversation, because that's a practice. It's a practice to stay committed to your path, even as if the world's swirling around you. And it's been, there's a lot of people who I've seen who are thriving right now and having their best years ever, even as the world's crazy. And it's not because the market's easier to sell in. For some industries, that's the case, but it's because this time has called certain leaders to commit more to their path and to take ownership of the world, and not let their beliefs be a reflection of what's happening around them, but have their beliefs be what influences the world around them. So that's what I really hear you speaking to. And it's so important in sales, but that's why we see salespeople as leaders, because who you are as a salesperson, the way you sell, is how you show up as a parent, as a father, as a family member, as a community member. Right. And are you really leaving it better than you find it in all your interactions? Because that's the deep place that you come from. So, it's great in theory, and it's great to have, you as an example of that, Ian, and the stuff that you're creating. So, and it's really cool that we got to spend that day together right before shit got crazy in March, right?
That's right.
Think back, it's like, I remember that weekend we held our event, and it was like by Tuesday, it was like shit was shut down. And like, if we had scheduled that event 1 week later, it would not have happened. So a lot of us in the community have thought back to how grateful we are that we got to share that experience and go into the storm from having been through that event. So glad you were part of it.
It was awesome. And I'm excited when you do live events again to support the community, for sure.
Yeah, happy to share some more. So Ian, I'm curious, right? There's a vision that came online for you that you pursued and that you realized. And as you're on your journey, vision shifts, and it should. Like, vision should change. It should up level. It should get more meaningful. It should get even deeper. And I'm curious just to hear from you right now, and I think everybody else would too. Like, what's the vision that you're pursuing now? And it could be a long-term vision, or it might be further out than just the next year or two. But what's that North Star that drives you, that guiding image that you're working towards and moving towards?
Yeah, it's a great question. It's something I've thought a lot about. I've been on paternity leave for 10 weeks, spending time with my family. And for those of you who followed me or have seen some of my podcasts, it's been a rocky road at best. I had a lot of success in my career, but my family was sacrificed in the process. And getting this performance and, truly exceeding everything, my ego got very, very high. And I had this vision that I was going to be this badass, sales trainer and, make this huge impact and get hundreds of thousands of followers. And in the whole process, I was ignoring what was right in front of me, which is my amazing family. And, literally this year, I almost lost them because I'd been selfish in terms of where I spent my time and energy. I also would struggle with addiction. And, as much as I performed and was successful at work, I needed a release for that success. I wasn't living day to day in a healthy place. And so I'd take these crazy Vegas trips, or I'd get wasted, and I do all kinds of things that were self-destructive. And so for me, my vision now is very different than what it used to be. And it's really surprising, because I never was a spiritual or religious person, but I think for me, what's really important is to follow God's principles in terms of being a loving, kind, honest, giving, generous, and faithful man, and doing that with my family first, with people that I serve in the business world second, and with myself in the way I live my life. And also the second part of that vision is really to inspire others to live their best lives. As I mentioned, I know how to sell, I know how to teach selling, and I've been doing it at a very high level. But what I didn't know how to do is have that balance in my life that truly brought happiness, joy, and fulfillment. So my vision is truly first to have the best possible relationship with my family, to be an example for my children in terms of how I show up every single day. And then my second vision is I really want to shift. Right now, I'm helping with my clients, and I'm in a role at Salesforce that is very strong. And a lot of people would want to be in this type of role where they'd have these big accounts. But for me, it's not as fulfilling and joyful as the impact of helping salespeople truly break free of whatever has been holding them back, because I got to experience that myself and I want to be able to pay it forward. So what I've done is I started a small coaching business, and I coach a handful of clients to help them really enhance their performance, but it's very minuscule at this point. So I need to figure out a way to be able to transition to be able to do that full time, because I love Salesforce and I love my job. But the reality is, if I can serve 2 clients versus serve literally hundreds of thousands or millions of salespeople, not from a place of ego or wanting to just prove how badass I am, but really from a place of service and helping them feel like they're more than just their performance, and find things that give them happiness and fulfillment first, so that then they can perform at their best, not the other way around, waiting for happiness. And that, to me, is so important, Ben. The changes that I've made, especially this year, in the past 9 months, have been the most profound changes that I've ever made. And that is more important to me than any sales training. So helping people realize, like, don't wait to be happy. Don't wait for, this external validation through, your quota attainment is really important. So what I do every day before I came in here, I went on a nice run on the beach. I was listening to a podcast to continue learning and growing. I took a cold shower to feel refreshed. I connected with my wife. I prayed. These are little things that I do every day that truly give me joy. I'm going to coach later today, right? So finding things in our lives that give you joy and make a priority is something that I think society needs more of right now. And what I really want to do is create a program for salespeople that combines selling skills and training with life and personal development, and truly can have that impact. Because there's a lot of great sales content, to your point, where you're learning tactical skills, and there's a lot of personal development, but to truly be able to merge the two and create the best of both, I think right now is an opportunity in the market. And there's literally millions of people in sales that struggle with the same challenges that I had. And there's a lot of depression, and there's a lot of anxiety, and there's a lot of addiction that I think is a result of that. And that's really where I want to make an impact. And so eventually I will have a program for people to learn selling and also learn those life skills that can make me happy, and it can make them find joy and fulfillment with their families and in their personal lives. And I all of the credit goes to you, Ben, because you've been teaching me this, right? And I wouldn't have been turned on to this different way of living and thinking had I not joined the Abundant program. So the impact that you've made on me is now going to make ripples in whatever I do in the future with whoever my future clients are going to be. So that's where my heart is. That's where my goals are. It's with faith, family, and service to the sales community.
It's awesome. Sales community needs it right now. So it's great to have you on the journey with that, brother. So
great to be part of your world, brother. I love what you're doing. Like I said, you got a gift, and bringing out like what people didn't know was possible. And that's what I needed at the time.
Yeah.
Now that I believe, it's a matter of just making it happen. So it's been awesome.
You've always been super supportive and encouraging, and I appreciate that. So it means a lot. Well, Ian, for those who, we're kind of coming up on time here, and just two final things. One, if anybody doesn't follow you, where can they do so? Is number one. And then number two is just any closing thoughts or things that you want to share or talk about before we wrap up here today.
Yeah. So as I mentioned, what I'm doing now is I'm producing videos every week for the sales community to help them get the sales skills and life skills that they need. So go to LinkedIn. That's where I'm active. Every week I post a video. If you message me on LinkedIn, I also have a newsletter that goes out. I'll get you on my newsletter and you'll get a training. Second place is YouTube. I have a YouTube channel where I produce videos, and all my previous sales training and life training videos are on there. If you subscribe to my YouTube, it's just Ian Koniak, IANKONIAK. LinkedIn and YouTube are the two best places. I also have a website, iankoniak.com. If you want to check out some of my blogs and posts, I'm very active in giving back to the sales community. And right now it's all free, and just trying to give back and pay forward what I learned from Ben and from so many other great resources. The other thing I'll say is, for people that want to tap into your belief in what's possible and may be struggling, I don't have my program yet, but Abundant is live and taking clients. So I would endorse Ben and his program heavily, and check out the Abundant site, because I was a 2-year program graduate, and those 2 years were my 2 biggest income years. So I cannot emphasize enough how powerful this stuff is, and that it works. And Ben and his whole team there will open your heart and your mind up to something that you probably have never experienced before. And I definitely endorse and encourage you to check them out as well.
Thanks a lot, Ian. Any other final words for you? To anybody?
Yeah, no, just keep it up, man. There's a lot of people who need what you're doing, who need what I'm doing. And I just love connecting with you, and I want to do it more often, because we haven't talked in a while. So I appreciate.
I know. It's great to have you on. Thanks so much for everything you shared today. Just giving a window inside to your journey is so valuable. Again, and I know I said this already, but it's one thing to hear this stuff in theory or as content, and the stories, I think, are where people really get impacted the most. So yep. You coming on here and sharing today really means the world, and I'm sure there's people who it's what they needed.
Yeah, and I think to that point, Ben, from a perspective, if you've gotten something from this or any content, that you've seen from Ben or myself, the key thing is to apply it, right? This is all great if you just listen, and if you don't change anything, then nothing's going to happen. And what I did that year is I changed how I sold. So if you're looking to just make a small change to make you feel better every single day, whatever it is, I would recommend setting a small goal. And if that goal has to do with exercise, that's a really easy one that you can do every day. When you set small goals that make you feel good, you show up more confident, you show up happier. So if your confidence is low, if you're feeling like maybe you're in a rut or COVID, this has been a bad year, do something for yourself that will give you that confidence. Set small goals, and those small goals become bigger goals. And all of a sudden you are exceeding what you thought was possible and you're ready to take on bigger challenges. So start today, stop waiting, and give yourself that joy and happiness first. Don't wait for permission until you perform.
I think that's a great place for us to end. So we'll just wrap with that. Thanks again, Ian.